This is Energy of Business Moments with Michael Sipe, the show that takes you around the world to share interviews with some of the most successful and relevant people on the planet. Hear their stories and get the most important business lessons they have learned on their road to success, and get exclusive advice on how to implement their business success into your life and business. Energy of Business Moments is brought to you by the Strategic Advisor Board and your host, Michael Sipe.
Hey everyone, welcome to the Strategic Advisor Board Energy of Business Moments podcast. I'm your host, Michael Sipe, and today I've got a real treat for you as a small business owner or entrepreneur, or even thinking about getting going on your business. I have a small business veteran of over 40 years, and she has had some very challenging moments running her business. In fact, there's been survival mode more than once. So when you think about the statistic of small businesses and their failure rates, especially past the 5-year point, hearing of somebody who's been in business for a long time is going to be very valuable. So today on the show, I've got Fran Tabor of Kalispell, Montana, and she has a small business there. But more importantly, she is an author, multi-time author. She is an author of It's a Secret: How to Compete Against Walmart and the Internet. And the other title of a book she has is Live Abundantly, 50 Business Lessons from the Bible. So Fran, great to have you on the show. Welcome to being here.
Thank you very much. It's an absolute thrill to be here with you.
Great. Well, Fran, there's a lot that you can share with us, but how about we start off on the author side before we get into your business? Because I am really curious. There's a secret, apparently, to helping to beat Walmart and the Internet. And you, in a small town, being able to do that can be pretty challenging. So please tell us a little bit about that book and a little bit about you.
Well, the book is not a formula for how to compete. What it is a source of the attitude it takes to compete. That each and every business has its own personality, its own secret for how that particular type will survive. But the one thing that all small businesses have in common that survive is their attitude and their basic essential knowledge of the world. If you have the attitude that you have to play it safe, what you're really saying is you want to be ignorant of the dangers of any business you're working for. Unless you're a government employee, your position is no safer than that of the owner. And one of the articles I have in that book was inspired by reading an article by Jim Collins. And Jim Collins is the author of Good to Great, Built to Last, and a couple of other books, all of which I highly recommend anybody read who wants to survive in business, because he doesn't write from theory and find the facts to fit it. He did the research, and the research changed a lot of his attitudes about what it took to survive. And it also turned him from a university employee to a genuine entrepreneur himself. But he gave a lecture to a group of Harvard graduates, and he afterwards was talking with them. And he said, well, what are you planning on doing? And he couldn't believe how many of them said, well, I would really like to start my own business, but I don't think it's safe, so I'm getting this job or that job. And he pointed out to them that when you're going to be investing, the first thing you are told as an investor is do not put all your eggs into one basket. You are putting your most important money-making tool, your work, in somebody else's basket. And worse yet, you have no idea how strong that basket is. If you're going to be self-employed, you are holding the basket, you know how weak or strong it is. And every one of your customers is the person who helps you make an income. You're not relying on only one source. In reality, self-employment in many times is more secure than being an employee. Now, there is one disadvantage to it. Banks don't know how to lend to the self-employed, and most businesses do not start out with a big amount and have this massive influx of cash where they're doing this factory where they're having a million employees. Most very big businesses started out small. A great many of them started out as a mom and pop operation that just gradually grew out of hand. Probably one of the most famous examples of that is McDonald's. Like McDonald's started out as a small mom and pop hamburger stand, and between the people who ran that efficiently and the guy that was selling them some of their supplies, instantly in only about 20 years, it became a worldwide phenomenon. But as a self-employed person, you know what's going on. The typical employee is like a draft horse with blinders. They don't see the dangers on the side of the road. If you are a business owner, whether self-employed, a single person, or you have a dozen employees or 500 employees, you have the blinders off and you know what's going on. And there's a famous line in a movie where the guy yells, "You can't handle the truth." If you're going to be self-employed, you have to be willing to handle the truth. The second great secret for competing with Walmart and the internet is to be fully and deeply aware of what it is you offer your community that would not be there if you were not there. That is smart advice to know that you're working not just for yourself, but your family and so on. But when you have a business, it goes beyond your family. It includes your family still. That's still extremely important. But it now includes your whole community. And it always amazes me how many small business owners, even some very, very successful ones, ones who've made a lot more money than I, excuse me, are unaware of why their business makes their community better. We recently had a bunch of politicians tell us that some businesses are not essential. I will have to admit, when that was first announced, my first thought was, oh, okay, some aren't. I hate to admit that I thought that at first because I wasn't exactly inexperienced in the world. I wasn't exactly inexperienced thinking about business. But it was only like a week later, I stopped to think, nobody parts with their money, or correction, almost no one parts with their money just because they're bored and walking down the street, taking a fistful of cash and throwing it into some business because they just had too much in their pocket that day. No, you spend money at a business because it solves a problem for you. And at that moment, for whatever reason, you believe that business was the one most able to solve your problem. Any business that solves the problems of consumers sufficiently well that they are supporting themselves and their families and additional families, they are solving problems. They are necessary to their community. And when you have a bad time and you think, well, it's not just me that will fail if I stumble at this point, but all these other people who are relying on me, it will make a difference. And if you know in your heart how you are making their lives better, even if your customers do not know or understand that you're making their lives better, you know it, it changes a lot. And it reinforces the faith that it takes to also be a business owner. And the necessity for faith is often very much misunderstood, but it is a statistical fact that those who regularly practice a religion, any religion, do tend to do better in either self-employment, small business ownership, and big business ownership. And that's because all businesses have ups and downs. And it takes faith to get through the downs, and anything you can do to practice faith is like any other exercise. Like the athlete that regularly practices basic movements has that basic movement when he needs it in the game. When you're in the game of business, you need that faith to get you through the down times that absolutely will happen. Even if during a downtime you forget all about faith and allow yourself to have a pity party. And if that happens, if you live long enough, you'll have a little pity party. Important thing is not to like it. And the other very important thing is if somebody wants to offer you pity, be really careful. Pity is the cocaine of emotions, and it will destroy you.
Wow,
Next.
Fran. Yeah, great, great bits of wisdom there. And, from my experience as a coach, we talk about the energy we bring. And for a lot of our audience, they know I've talked about how our emotions and our thoughts and our behaviors contribute to our individual energy level, either in the moment or throughout the day, or maybe through a period. And maybe there's a business transition. So we carry a certain energy associated with that because of those thoughts, emotions, and actions. And you said at the very beginning, the biggest thing was the attitude. And that is really all about the emotions. It could be the pity party, as you were saying. It can be like, I've got a lot of competition. I've got to fight through this. It can be the compassionate side. How do I help my customer who's very frustrated? How do I help them, get through and figure out why their vacuum cleaner isn't working, right? There can be different emotions that we bring, different attitudes we bring. And so that I think that is the most important thing about all of this, because when it comes to those survival moments, how we respond as a business owner is so, so critical. And you gave me a wealth of challenging moments in your life. You talked about getting cancer and being uninsured and having to deal with that financially. You talked about how there's a downturn in the last period where you went from 2% to 27% credit card debt just to keep employees on the payroll. Those are a lot of survival moments. And I think our listeners and audience would love to hear a little bit more about those survival moments and how you dealt with them. So if you don't mind, please share about a few of them and what you did there.
Well, there were many factors that led to the single most despairing moment of my business. One of them is that if you are a key manager or business owner or responsible for others, if you do not take care of yourself, your most important asset, you will not be able to take care of others. People that do survival training are taught that they do not put themselves in such jeopardy that the rescuer has to be rescued. I had always, well, since my early 30s, I had been on a low thyroid dose. And then my doctor that had prescribed it retired. So I went to a new GP and just said, hey, I just need to have the thyroid dose renewed. I don't need to see a doctor. I feel great. And I honestly thought I felt great. What I did not tell him is that my 15-minute in the afternoon power naps had turned into a couple of hours. I'd end up taking naps in the mornings. I had actually moved a cot in my office. So whenever I had the need for a nap, I would lay down for a little bit. And I was actually only fully functional about 5 or 6 hours a day, but this had happened gradually over a period of time. In 1 year's time, I also gained 60 pounds, which is not surprising because I ate the same amount and I was sleeping 15 hours a day. The doctor insisted on a full examination. He was not going to renew anybody's prescription without a full, complete examination. I went to him, and one of the first things he did was feel my throat. And he said, well, how long have you had this lump here? And I go, what lump? Come find out, anybody who is on low thyroid is more apt to develop thyroid cancer than 95% of women are ever apt to develop breast cancer. And everybody on thyroid medication should be feeling their throat every day for any lump. It ended up scheduling me for an operation. When guy operated on it, he expected it to be a 30-hour operation. It was a 30-minute operation. It was a 2-hour operation because it turned out that my whole thyroid had dissolved because I had undiagnosed Hashimoto's, which meant basically my body was allergic to my own thyroid. And it took him 2 hours to suck out all the slime my thyroid had turned into. It was amazing. I was functioning at all. This meant for several years, I was asleep at the wheel when it came to managing my business. When you're asleep at the wheel, whether you're driving a car, managing a business, managing a household, you will wreck. I had 2 employees who were embezzling. I did have the uninsured cancer, but I had looked into it, changing rules that we had in Montana, and a decent insurance policy would have cost me, I forget how many dollars a month, but I had an insane amount of credit card credit available to me. And I figured out, well, if something happened to me, my total payments if I mixed them out on my credit cards would actually be a couple dollars less than insurance. I thought, well, if I ever got really sick, I'd max out my credit cards. And if I didn't, I'd be saving that money. It seemed like a no-brainer. And that part would have worked, except when I recovered from the operation, which was really funny. When I first woke up and I was all groggy, I felt like a 60-pound weight had been taken off my back. My whole body was just going, this is wonderful. I had no idea that my body had been feeling so bad till it felt really good again. And going, wow, this is what I used to feel like. And then with my energy back, I started looking at my books the way I would have a few years previously. And I go, this does not make any sense. I had what for my little business was an absolute major amount of embezzlements. I owed a huge amount of money. And so I paid for all my medical expenses, and then I used the rest of my credit card credit, which was close to 200,000, for paying off creditors. And I thought, well, at least using credit cards, nobody would know I was so incredibly stupid as to gotten into this place, because the embezzlements, to my way of thinking, were so obvious. I should have caught them. They first started happening several years previously. What I did not know is that credit cards that get paid off every month can have the real low rate of interest. And my credit cards were 2% to 3%. One was clear up to 5%. And all of a sudden, like they're 15 to 29%. And I called them up and said, why? You have never had a late payment, never had an underpayment. And they go, well, that's when you didn't need credit. When you need credit, you're in a different category, and this is your rate. So I swallowed my pride. This was 2008 when the recession hit, and they had changes in banking laws. I went to my bank, and I am very fortunate that I own the property that my business is in. And the banker said, Fran, I know you. I've worked with you for years. I know what the property is worth. I should be able to just refinance it and just cover all this, because really the amount of money that goes to your business is not that excessive of a debt. However, the banking laws have changed. The way this looks and this looks and this looks, if I were to offer any type of loan more than a few thousand, the feds would be on me right now. He was struggling for survival, which really shocked me, because he is actually one of the smarter bankers I've ever worked. But he was a small independent bank. And this was when they had the big banking crisis, and they had the new laws to keep that from happening again. But it was the big banks that were helping rewrite those laws, and small banks that were solvent and doing a good job all across the country, they put so many of them out of business. But that's another story. That was his struggle. He managed to get through it. He formed an alliance with several small banks. And so there I was. If I would have not been so prideful, come in a couple of months sooner, I would have sailed through the recession. But I didn't. I was proud. Excessive pride goes before the fall. And I spent the next 3 years, it was really kind of funny. I spent the next 3 years basically eating oatmeal 3 times a day and doing what it took to survive, because I knew what my business brought to the community. I had faith I would get through it, although the faith was very sorely challenged. And eventually I did. But what made it kind of funny is that my business, even though we were way down from what we were in 2007, I had 27 employees. I was thinking I should hire more. And end of 2008, I had 8 employees from 27 to 28, from 27 to 8. And there were times when the 8 did not have enough to do. I mean, the way the recession hit our town was just incredible. To give an idea, in 2007, I hated driving at noon because the traffic was just unbearable. In 2008, the traffic was the same as it was right at the height of the COVID crisis. Nobody on the street. It was just a really weird thing. Thought I had seen economic downturns before. It was like nothing else. And so I hit that economic downturn with more debt than I had ever had in my life, and the worst kind of debt to have. And in the middle of all this, when I realized just how bad it was, and it, anyways, it was my fault that bad, that I had told other people that they should have a physical checkup every year, and I went almost 10 years without one. And I had a pity party. And pity parties turn off your brain cells, something horrible. And then I picked up an early version of my book, 50 Business Lessons from the Bible, and the chapter about the importance of being thankful. And I thought, well, yeah, that was easy for me to write back then when I had so many things to be thankful for. And I was like, I heard this voice in the side of my head going, well, you believe those words back then. Why don't you believe them now? And the voice had to repeat that to me over and over again. So finally I said, okay, I'll find something to be thankful for. I just said, thank you, God, for existing. But how about some help with the mortgage right now?
Right.
And I felt like God was laughing at me. But it did open up my brain cells. That day when I went downtown, it seemed like every store I went into, everybody looked miserable. The grocery store clerk was miserable. The other people picking out vegetables looked miserable. And I had not noticed that the day before. I was so busy concentrating on my own misery, I honestly did not notice everybody else looked just as miserable. And I went back to my shop that day and said, we are going to be an oasis of happiness. We are going to do everything we can to make everybody smile who comes in. We're going to greet them like it's the most wonderful, beautiful day of the year and be sincere about it. And my employees were great. They, all 8 of them, they picked up on it. And they said, yes, we will be an oasis of happiness. And it made a difference. People would come in just, and they would leave with a big smile on their face. And that is something Walmart with their paid greeters cannot do. That is something the internet cannot do. That if you are a business dealing directly one-on-one with people, you can affect their mood. And people do pay to be happier. That's why musicians make money. That is why actors and actresses make money. And that is why we small business owners have access to making money not available to any big box store.
Wow, that's a great point, Fran. And when you think about where you came from, those low moments, a series of lows, and then another one, and then another one, you know, that I wrote a book and I have this great thing about gratitude, and I know it's really important, but not right now. And you know, those are the moments that try us. Those are the ones that, are we really honoring the words that we spoke or wrote before?
Right.
Are those values really our values? And and I think a lot of us can relate to that, where we have those things that we cherish, we have our ideals, but then when we get thrown into the fire, what happens then? And do we still follow that, right? And I love how you got that message to be grateful for something, and you recognized and saw your environment enough. You went from an internal focus to an external focus. And that external focus saw the depression going on all around you, and you did not like it. And you decided, I'm going to do something about it. And the rest, of course, is history. And what I also would point out is what our audience doesn't know is you showed me a graph earlier, and I'll share it here a little bit later for those who can see the YouTube channel. But basically, it showed that month to month over many years, your growth and your expenses, and how sometimes you had appreciation and sometimes you had some liabilities. And the 2008, 2009 period where it just dropped. And then you changed, and not overnight, but a long,
Little
steady
tiny-
progress, just baby steps, it brought you back out. And then there was another piece where you had, obviously, where you had to do some capital infrastructure and things like that, and go negative for a little bit. But then now you're rocketing back out at a much steeper rate than you did coming out of 2008, 2009. So those are some really tangible and relatable lessons that are very, very wise. And I love that. So that's for how you've pivoted out of some challenging moments. But I would love to hear about what makes you so joyous about doing the business. What are maybe a moment you had, or a couple of moments that really, from an attitude perspective, just keep you uplifted, and maybe even your employees uplifted?
I do often have customers thank us for being in business. That we do more than vacuums now. We have sewing machines, cleaning supplies. I have a lot of people that have gone into self-employment and went into cleaning homes, that they'll come to us for the advice that mother never gave them for how to do different types of cleaning, and they thank us for that. Other people, for my janitorial supply, I cater to small businesses that the big suppliers can call them the big businesses, but they just can't afford to call them the small ones. And the internet, you have customer responses on the internet, but you never know if those are genuinely customer responses or paid by a company. And there's a lot of incorrect information. And I have businesses that will come to me and say, well, what is the best type of disinfectant to use here? And I provide that information for them in bite-sized pieces that they can understand. If they have questions I don't know the answer to, I've been in the business long enough. I know the people to call up all over the country to get advice myself and say, well, this is what has worked for other people in your situation. People going into cleaning homes for a living for the first time, I give them basic business advice for how to bill customers and teach them that they are now charging retail rates to their customer, and they've been in the habit, and they've worked for others, of being paid wholesale rates. And all businesses that survive pay their employees a wholesale rate and resell it to the customer at a retail rate. You buy labor just like a grocery store buys a gallon of milk. They buy it wholesale, they resell it retail. And a lot of people, when they first go into self-employment and gradually work up to being a true business owner with employees themselves, really struggle with the idea of charging more than what they are accustomed to earning as an employee. I also teach people how to take care of what they have. Like something as basic as the fact that a vacuum that's plugged up won't work. You and I might think that that's pretty basic. Young gal that just bought a vacuum and already has quit, and I explained to her, okay, this is, it's plugged up. This is how you could tell it was plugged. And I have actually had some gals that absolutely in tears because they were scared that if they're going to have to buy another vacuum, they didn't have the money for it that month. And I was able to get their vacuum again going, either anywhere from free to $5, depending upon how involved and time consuming the problem was. And people appreciate it when they are educated for how to use what they have, how to use it more effectively. And it does help having a business where I frequently have people thank me for business. I deal with many people in my business. I have people driving couple 100 miles to come here. And occasionally we make a mistake, and occasionally we will have the customer that makes you feel like you're the scum of the earth. You can't make happy. And it's a real temptation to concentrate on that one person you can't make happy, which to a certain extent you could, and say, what could I have done to have prevented this so it doesn't happen again? But some people you just cannot make happy. And it is a very important lesson to learn, to not let that person dominate your thoughts the rest of the day, or you're not going to give everybody else the service they deserve. And that was probably one of the hardest lessons for me to learn, that I would go to sleep at night thinking of the would-haves, could-haves, should-haves. And I would be thinking of that one bad experience all week, instead of letting my mind go back to the people that were thankful and happy that I survived, that I helped them survive a little bit better.
Yeah, great. Fran, when
And
we talk about that, the part about the gratitude, right, and the
mhm,
appreciation that the customers express, but then you have that one negative that
yeah,
that just weighs you, like, and maybe it was the one thing they said, maybe it was a hot button for you, and they hit that hot button, but yeah,
well,
we can.
something like, you should not be in business. You're just a rip off on everybody. That can hurt your feelings,
Sure
especially when
can.
you tried your best.
Yeah. Yeah, right, right. And this is the beauty about the energy of business, is that we have these kinds of things, and energetically that will suck us. It'll
Oh,
it'll it'll be a huge suck, right?
it'll, and if you have a brand new employee that it happens to them, you've got to be right there. You said you coach.
Hmm.
I'm sure you've had the person that you thought was well trained were put out in the field, and he just, not his fault, had every bad experience that can happen. Got to be there for them.
Absolutely. Yep. Yep. And there's that mama bear piece of, that's my employee. How dare you, treat my employee like that, right? But that's part of being a business owner, is when you talked about community, that community isn't just the customers, right? It's also the people, the 8 to 27 or more people that are related to you, and all of those people that you do business with, those other small business owners, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
In fact, my maiden name was Bear, and I know all about the mama bear attitude.
I bet you do. Well, I have really enjoyed hearing about your experience. There's some, I would say, some really amazing life lessons as well as business lessons in what you shared. And I am very curious, because we ask this question of most of our guests, if you could meet anybody, deceased or living, who would that be and why?
Well, first, I am very thankful that I believe that we will have eternity available to us, because it would take that long for me to really talk with everyone I'd like to. But Joseph from the book of Genesis, I would really like to talk to him about what he felt like when his brothers first sold him into slavery, what kind of thoughts went through his mind as he made that trip to Egypt, what gave him the ability to be one of the best slaves that the person who bought him had, that he ended up being in charge of the whole household. When he was falsely betrayed and thrown into jail, and again betrayed by the people who had promised to help him, how he kept having the perseverance and strength to be able to still do his best. Where people are familiar with the story, he went from slave to second only to Pharaoh in all the land of Egypt. He was able to save his family. And then after his father died, that he had genuinely forgiven his brothers for first planning to kill him, and then what in the ancient world would have been much worse than killing him, selling him into slavery. He sent off to a foreign land where he would most likely be dead within a year or two after a very bad life. And yet, always did his best. He always had his faith that eventually things would work out, and he was able to forgive those who had done him wrong. I do not think if I would have had his life path, I would have performed in anywhere near his level and been able to sustain still trying at the level he had. I would just really be interested in talking to him and finding out where that amount of inner strength came from and that amount of ability to forgive came. It's quite a life story. It had a wonderful, happy ending. I also know that for many people living like he did, the happy endings would not come, and yet I've known that still kept trying to the end. Viktor Frankl's book, and Search for Meaning, described people that he said when he was in the concentration camps, the best people died because they gave all their food to others, and people did not even realize that they were giving their last food. I don't know if I would have been, but I think Joseph would have. That's just consistent with his life. And I just would really, really like to talk to somebody like him and find out where they were able to consistently have that amount of faith and strength. Because my life, it was not consistent. I had a lot of downs. I had moments where I was just totally pity party. And I am very thankful I was able to get out of that. Joseph had a party moment.
No, probably not. And it makes sense that you'd have somebody like that as somebody who you would like to talk to. That's a great explanation. And I think a lot of us can relate to that. What I also find interesting, of course, is that's just one lesson, and a huge lesson to glean from, a couple lessons to glean from Joseph there. But you've written that book, obviously, about Live Abundantly, 50 lessons from the Bible. What caused you to write that book? And how about you share one or two of those lessons in addition to what you just shared with us now?
That people who were more religious than I was were more apt to be successful in business than the average. That a lot of them didn't go and get very big businesses, but they had small businesses. They had a few employees. They had a very comfortable lifestyle. They could afford whatever they wanted, and they had the life they wanted. And it just seemed logical if people that genuinely follow the Bible better than I did, consistently did better than business, there had to be some good advice there. Plus, it's an accurate, I believe it's an accurate history of just a lot of things of people happening and what people do with other people. One of the reasons I think it's an honest history is that a lot of what's in there does not reflect well on the people. It includes the good, the bad, the ugly, and all of it. And so I started reading through it, and it's basic things like diligent laziness. It is important to take time out and take a break from what you do and think that you need some type of hobby that is something different than your business. And whether that's just attending church one day a week or something else, but it's something that gets your brain away from what you're doing. And that is actually the secret to a lot of advanced creative thought. Like the most successful mathematicians I know, if they were bothered with a problem, they would go paint a room or something and then go back to the problem. I had a chapter called Money and Shovels. Church is the same thing. And basically, Bible says that money is a tool. And shovels. And basically, I compared it to a shovel. If somebody gave you a brand new shiny shovel, is a tool, and you put it up in the closet, and I compared it to a shovel. If somebody gave you a brand new shiny shovel, as if you had never used it, put it up in the closet. But if you use that shovel and look at it on occasion, plant some seeds, absolutely worthless, as if you had never used it. Money is the same way. But if you use that shovel to dig out a garden, plant some seeds, worthless to others. You soon have a great bounty. You can invest it the same way. If you just business, you can invest it to you and worthless to others. You can invest it in business. You can invest it. That is a clock.
Okay.
And that is a clock. That is a
We have a
clock.
few more clocks coming.
And that is the last clock. We have a bird clock and we have an old grandmother. And that is the last clock.
Cool. Nice.
We have a
Nice.
bird clock and
Yeah,
we
if you
have
could
an old
pick up on that
grandmother.
lesson again.
Antique grandmother clock chime. Money is a tool. If you hoard it, it is worthless to you and everybody else. Okay. Even just money is a bank savings account. If you hoard it, it is collateral to help lend out everybody else and help the community grow. Even just putting it in the bank savings account, the bank can use that as collateral to help lend out. You can invest it in your family to educate your family. You can invest it in a mutual fund and help businesses grow. You can do many things with it, but you can invest it in your family to educate your family. But money that is just hoarded, but money is not of value to anybody. It is value. It's like that money that is just hoarded, and like if you leave that shovel out in the rain where it rusts, it's like money that's thrown away and wasted. And like if you leave that shovel out in the rain where it rusts, take care of it's like money that's thrown away and wasted.
Great.
And they're to be used. Money's a tool. Take care of your tools, and they'll take care of you. And there's also for why you have employees that you can have an employee to do what you would do if you had the time. There's also for why you have employees that you can have an employee to do what you would do if you had the time. And then the other reason for having an employee is to do what letting somebody else do something. You're multiplying yourself. And you have to be aware. And then the other reason for having an employee is to do what you cannot be willing to do that. Which may seem like you have to be aware of where your abilities lie, but it's not really willing to do that. Amazing how many small business owners obviously not delegate enough, but it's not really wonder why. Amazing how many small business say they're out sick or something. Do not delegate enough, and then wonder why they have to learn how to delegate. Say they're out sick or something, nothing gets done, and taking advantage of other people's abilities. Delegation is multiplication. And one of the first examples in the Bible of taking advantage of other people's ability is very important. Is that in the actual story of one of the first examples in the Bible of taking advantage of other people's ability, God said, "Well, you have this brother named Moses. Moses is a great public speaker. Use him. I'm a lousy public speaker." God said, "Well, you have this brother named Aaron. He is a Ten Commandments. All those cool lines that Moses was giving." They should have been done by actuality in the movie 10 Commandments. All those Hollywood lines that Moses was giving. Yeah. Right. They should have been done by Eric.
Fran, those are all wonderful lessons
Hollywood
from
had
that book of yours. And can people get that book online? Yes, it's available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble and a wide variety of other places. Yes, it's available through Amazon and Barnes & Noble and a wide variety of other places. Really, really valuable. And obviously, if somebody's in Kalispell, Montana, they can come and visit your store and come meet you in person. But, you've got a lot of other things that you offer, especially in books. You're author in other areas, science fiction being one of them. Yeah. So what we will do is in the show notes, we will put some of those links in there for people to be able to reach out to you. But I just have to say, it's been an absolute pleasure and treat having you on the show. And you have touched on some valuable lessons that I think a lot of people will walk away with knowing that, wow, that's some pretty impressive stuff. So, Fran, thanks for being on the show today. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity. I really enjoyed it.
Thanks for listening to Energy of Business Moments with your host, Michael Sipe. Please leave your feedback and visit strategicadvisorboard.com to get the latest and greatest business advisement on the planet. Follow us on social media for updates, and we will see you on the next episode.